caffeine, at least a few pints. Hey
It's
everyone.
100% true for me. Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Shefali. We were just talking about the need to caffeinate ourselves, and you mentioned that you drink your coffee out of a pint glass, which I love.
Yes.
We need as much as possible on a Monday morning.
I find like the coffee cup is too small and I'm constantly refilling it. So, yes. And yes, it's definitely a couple of pint glasses every day.
I love it. Now, is that like an iced coffee or is that a hot
No,
coffee?
hot coffee in a pint glass. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, sometimes it's iced coffee, right? So it just depends. It's iced coffee, iced chai, it depends on what caffeine source for the day. But yeah, all the coffee, all the tea, all the chai out of the pint glass. A friend of mine taught me that years ago. And I at first looked at her like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Well," and as she looked at me as if I was growing a third year, and now I get it. Now I get it. So yeah,
Well, now you are a pint glass coffee connoisseur. I love
yes.
that for you.
Thanks.
and and welcome to the podcast. I
Thank
know
you.
this has been a long time coming. I feel like you and I have just the most incredible chats about all things ranging from politics to volunteer work at work to philanthropy to social impact. I mean, we just intersect so many different realms and spheres. So, give us a little bit of an introduction. Tell us who you are, other than someone who drinks coffee out of a pint cup.
Right. Yeah. No, that should not be the sum total of who I am. I am today the founder and CEO of my own company called The Better We. My whole purpose or gig is to try to empower communities for the greater good, whether that's working with individuals or organizations. And organizations can be anything from nonprofit organizations to companies to higher ed service, like higher ed institutions who focus on service learning or building tomorrow's leaders. Um, so just any organization or group, it could be a municipal government for all we know,
Mm.
that is working on empowering their community in some way that matters to them. And I am here to support that effort in whatever ways that I can bring to bear. So that's what I do today. My background is 20 years of service, whether it was in government or a nonprofit, at working in a variety of different capacities, for supporting environmental initiatives, working at one of the largest food banks in the country, most recently as the executive director of DuPage County's Volunteer Center, which is called Giving DuPage. That was what I did for almost a decade, just before I started my own company. And I guess like the through line in terms of skills is probably like sales and marketing and telling stories um, and really just being interested in people and what they do. So
Mm.
yeah, that's that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah, and you and I have talked quite a bit about the need for organizations to kind of bake in philanthropy into their ethos of how they do business, how they align it to their values, what that means for the engagement of employees, and really the responsibility of business and organizations to have an engaged role, a civic role, um, in their communities where they live, work, play, employ people. So tell us a little bit about what that means for you.
Well, I think what I have seen and what I know to be true is organizations that build in some sense of giving back, philanthropy, service in their culture. It does just basic outcomes that people can't deny. First, it recruits talent that you want. Um, it was a big aha moment. It's one thing when you read trends and data on a piece of paper, on a website. There's another thing when you actually hear it and see it and experience it. So I'll never forget the time when I was sitting with then millennial, and she was in her 20s. Um, this is quite a while ago. And she's like, well, I would just never work for a company that didn't have some sort of like philanthropy or giving back. And it was just so matter of fact for her when she was talking about it. She happened to work for a large company that is a national organization, national retailer. But it I absolutely believed her. I absolutely believed that it wouldn't even be a consideration for her as a younger person to have found a job right out of college that was not with a company that didn't believe in giving back. So in terms of just recruiting the kind of talent you're looking for, you absolutely are, that's a big thing in terms of the company profile, in terms of the checklist that a candidate is looking for when they're looking to join a company. Also, just helps with retention. There's data that shows how employees stay with organizations because philanthropy is a part of the ethos, the culture, and I think that's because you guys have a great expression, and I'm going to say it wrong, but like, if it happens in the world, it happens at work, or so. Tell me how you
Yeah.
say it? Is that right?
Yeah. If it's happening in the world, it's happening at work. You got
Yeah. So
it.
how that connects to philanthropy for me is, um, listen, all of us have stuff going on in our lives, right? I mean, all of us. It doesn't matter if you're a C-suite or if you're sort of the person who's working hourly at a company. It doesn't really matter. We all have things happening, right? Families are in illness, and kids are struggling at school, and health problems prevail, and real economic concerns are there. Whatever these things that happen outside of work are happening at work because we are walking in with them, right? We as people are walking in with them. We come in as people who have histories and perhaps trauma in our histories, perhaps things and issues that we have intimate experiences with. And we all know that those are all things that we sort of carry. It doesn't mean they're all active in our work lives, right? It just means that these are the things that fully formed us, right? And so it's a real aha moment for me when I understood exactly what your expression is, which if it's happening if it's happening out in the world, it's happening at work because we walk
Yes.
into work. We don't, yes, we're brilliant at compartmentalizing. So when we're at work, we focus on work, but that's so not how it is. And we all know there's like a huge mental health crisis that everybody's grappling with, right? Whether you're a parent, a student, or whatever. So again, the volunteering service giving back actually is connected to lower rates of depression and isolation. Philanthropy creates belonging. It also helps employees understand that the company is not operating in some like in its own silo. Every company
Right.
is a part of a greater community, right? And so it's not happening in a silo. Whatever's happening to your company is not happening in a silo. It happens with great impact in your community, in your zip code, in your town, in your county, in your region, right? And so employees really get a sense of understanding how connected all of this is, right? It's not like companies don't have to deal with like social issues because their employees are struggling with these social issues, right? So I just think all of these things are connected, and nothing is in its own silo, and that's why philanthropy in the workplace, whether it's through creating volunteer opportunities and volunteer engagements, or creating moments of philanthropy and giving back, hosting a collection drive. These are all things that really lead to a workplace that people want to work at.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I kind of figured out. And I think companies who engage in these activities really see it and understand it.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something which is something I talk quite a lot about, which is a workplace is nothing more than a community itself, right?
Mhm.
You've brought people together for a common mission, for a common cause, for a common something, right? Ideally, it's a common good because we want
Yeah.
to be doing good in the world. But
Right.
you mentioned this idea of um, service micro moments, which first of all, I want to talk more about, but I also want to mention that you are going to be doing this with our event, the Culture Impact Lab, which is the Equity Center Conference for Workplace Culture and Change Leaders. It's where we bring together these topics of social impact and workplace and the blurring of the lines between the world and work, which we just talked about. So
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about what that can look like and how this is not like a heavy lift, right? I think sometimes organizations think about philanthropy or giving back or social impact as it has to be this huge undertaking, but really there's a way to kind of weave it in. So tell us a little bit more about these micro moments.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, there are ways to just on a monthly basis create these moments. So it could be as simple as hosting a blood drive. These are things that a lot of companies do, right? But I think during COVID, a lot of that went obviously because workplaces were shut
Of
down,
course.
right? So during COVID, for example, there was a really big blood supply shortage, right? But I am not sure that those blood drives have bounced back up to the levels where they were, right? So that's a really basic thing, really important, critically important thing, right? And also because our blood supply has a very finite amount of time, like it's not like you can have a blood supply, like, it's got I think there's a shelf life on how long blood
Yes.
is okay, um,
Mm-hmm.
viable. Um, it could be as simple as writing note cards, right? Get involved with maybe your local food pantry that gives food to kids, or your Meals on Wheels organization that is delivering food to seniors and writing note cards to those seniors, to those kids. You can, you and I talked about like when we met
Mm-hmm.
last, all the horror of the LA fires and the tragedy of that was happening. You could start
Mm-hmm.
a little note card campaign for first responders, right? Um, Showing them the love that we all and our gratitude that we feel for them and their service.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's so many ways to just reach people with small little note cards, letters. You can create templates for employees to use because sometimes people are like, well, what do I write? And so you can, like,
Mm-hmm.
whoever's job it is to organize that micro moment can just find a few templates online. There's so many choices to do that. It could be as simple as, let's say, um, supporting local artists and putting up their artwork in your company halls, right? These are ways to create community and promote like arts and arts organizations, right? It could be as simple as doing a collection drive, which I think a lot of companies do, but they do it only during the holidays, and I'm not sure why. It doesn't have to be during the holidays only, right? Like for example, Operation Support Our Troops is always collecting things for the troops deployed around the world, right? And so one month you can say, hey, let's collect, I don't know, shaving lotion. Another month you could say,
Mm-hmm.
let's collect, peanut butter and jelly packets or
Mm-hmm.
hot sauce packets or whatever you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it seems like these things wouldn't really make an impact, but they really do, because what it does is helps people understand that giving back doesn't mean you have to write a $200 check. Giving back doesn't mean you have to dedicate a whole 8-hour shift somewhere. While that's great, and if you have the bandwidth to do it, that's awesome. Giving back can be done almost anywhere. Just there are entire companies who during COVID figure out how to volunteer, encourage employees to become volunteer tutors during their lunch hour. So you can
Mm-hmm.
just become an online tutor. And so a lot of the large corporations who have, philanthropy programs in place and engagement programs in place with their employees, they really did that word pivot. They did that pivot to like online tutoring and encouraged employees to do online tutoring. You could be the director of marketing in your company and figure out how to have your marketing team adopt a charity and do a marketing campaign for your charity, or design flyers for their next fundraiser. And these are things that you can do straight from the workplace, assuming your workplace allows you to use your technology
Mm-hmm.
for that purpose, that philanthropy, that giving back, that volunteer moment. There's just a lot of different ways to think about it, um, and be creative.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing those very specific examples because I think we need to hear those tactical ways where I think organizations, just as they've been built, companies, businesses have been very internally focused, right? Like we do things for our shareholders, the profit, all the capitalism, of course, that has
Yeah.
been baked in.
Yeah.
And I think what we're saying here is, we have an opportunity to leverage those platforms not only to give back, but also it engages and energizes the workforce, right? There's data that tells us that. I mean, you mentioned about some of the data around um, hiring, recruiting talent, retention, reducing turnover, but there's also a huge element of like service is kind of built into us, right? As humans, we want to give back. We actually feel and there is kind of a very clear connection to happiness and joy when we give back, and um, not everything is about taking and exploiting, right? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
how do we think about taking that very human element of the human experience as we're building community as a workplace and incorporating it into everything that we do. And it doesn't have to be a huge lift, but it does take some organizing. It does take some intention. And I always think about this as like just like culture building. There's a groundswell around it, but there's a top down and bottom up. We need to see role modeling from the top. We need to see leaders doing it. And there's this groundswell of like, how do you capture the issues and the causes that matter to the people who work with you, right? Like how do you collect that and then match some of the activities or the micro moments to those causes to get the participation. So it is a very much a culture building tool in a way. I mean, I hate to
Yeah.
use the word tool, but it is a tool that can be used to build camaraderie, and those behaviors are infectious. Like we forget that.
Absolutely.
Like
Kindness is contagious. It is.
yes,
I'm
it's a
bringing back
contagion.
contagious in a positive way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kindness is contagious. It really is. Yeah.
yes, the kindness pandemic. I'll take it. It is contagious. It is infectious, and when you start to build this culture, even if it's not something that's like contributing to your bottom line, it's about building up these citizenship behaviors. It's about building up this idea of team and camaraderie, and that transfers into the work,
Yeah.
right? Again, we're whole humans.
Yeah.
So if you just think of
Exactly.
humans as people who clock in, do work for you and clock out, you're doing this all wrong because
Correct.
we've
Yeah.
passed that
Yeah.
moment.
I mean, let me just jump back a little bit about sort of just how we're wired to give back. It's actually a very even American characteristic. I'm not saying it's strictly American, obviously, it's
Mm-hmm.
not. But like, there's this sort of famous understanding of a Frenchman who visited America early in its history. His name is Alexis de Tocqueville. And de Tocqueville talked about how he was just so surprised how Americans had this spirit of giving back and taking care of one another. And he found that to be just so uniquely American. And I love that possibility. I love that idea, right?
Mm.
And so I do think we are wired to understand that we can all help each other and give in our own way. It does create culture and community. If you're a CEO and if you think your employees aren't being impacted by things that are happening in their families, in their worlds, issues that they're impacted by, you are incorrect, right? And when you create that sense of community, and there's also like every leader at a company, every CEO, every leader understands that their company is a microcosm of that community too, right? So every
Yes.
time you are strengthening the ties that bind us all together, you are actually helping the system as a whole, and you are helping your employees understand, and you're modeling behavior that you want in your employees. You want employees who have compassion and empathy, who have who can, in service and giving back, as ways to build that emotional intelligence. You want employees who have gratitude for their own work because they're contributing to an issue and they're understanding the social issue through their service that they didn't know before. And then they're all of a sudden having more gratitude for their own life and their own work that they do, right? Um, you want to help employees who might privately be struggling with depression and isolation, and giving back creates a sense of belonging. It actually, like, volunteering in service does lower rates of depression. um, these are all things that go into this sort of intangible. I mean, I know you know how to quantify culture. I don't, and I think it's hard for people to talk about it tangibly, right?
Yes.
But you do want to create these feelings that you want to create this as a part of your DNA, not feelings. It's
Mm-hmm.
just your as a part of your DNA, and create connection for employees that are beyond just showing up at work and doing the job at hand, right? Because it's so much
Absolutely.
more than that, right? That's also why, like, we offer healthcare. That's why now organizations are offering not just daycare but pet care, right? Like, there's all these other things that are contributing to a person's happiness at work, and proud to be connected with a company.
Mm.
There's so just it builds a there's a lot of ties that get strengthened when you
Yes.
incorporate this into your company DNA.
Yeah. I want to shift topics a little bit here because this is something you and I talked about. Is this idea of there's kind of a volunteer scarcity happening around the next generation, and this scares me.
Yeah,
This concerns me because as someone who is both of us are trying to build this, like, build a better world for the future. And so tell us a little bit about what the data is telling us around Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and their volunteerism or giving back.
so there's a couple things, and instead of throwing statistics, I'll just sort of say general
Yeah.
trends. There's a few things. First, um, volunteering was already sort of going down with younger aged people, and um, and that was happening before the pandemic, right? So that was happening before the pandemic. It was just hard to get younger people. I mean, that's sort of like the big thing. Like, nonprofits are like, how do we get young people engaged in our cause and our mission, right? And so there's always just that was already happening, and then COVID happened, and two things happened with COVID. One, the majority of volunteers who are senior citizens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Seniors went away from volunteering strictly
Yeah, of
because of the
course.
health concerns. And also, a lot of seniors passed away, right? We lost a lot of senior citizens during COVID who were
Mm.
also happen to be great volunteers in their communities. And also, people who used to volunteer, regardless of age, stopped volunteering. And then that it's been hard to rebuild back up. So
Mm-hmm.
while volunteering is ticking back up, while people are finding different ways to give back, it is still not in its robust pre-pandemic levels. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take a long time to rebuild that volunteer bank. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, and this is a even more disconcerting, I think, or worry for me, is that a lot of young people, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, actually don't believe that volunteering can make a difference. They actually don't even see how they themselves can make a difference. Like, how can I, as one young person, even my voice doesn't matter, my anything doesn't matter, my vote doesn't matter, right? A lot of young people really feel disconnected to the idea that they, as one individual, can make a meaningful difference. They're like, why would it even matter if I go volunteer for 2 hours at such and such organization? How's that really going to change anything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of young people really feel that. Like, they have this sort of very, what's the word I'm trying to land on? But it's sort of your disheartened view of, like, their own impact, right? And so, how do we rebuild that? Uh, Belief is a different and more complex question. I think that takes a lot more than just one workplace can do it. Like workplaces can do it, and parents can do it, and mentors can do it, and teachers can do it. But we got to remind young people that actually young people are what were at the. I was at an event that you joined me at, and this keynote speaker was somebody who was a civil rights leader back with the bus boycott, of in the South, and a young person asked this exact question of him afterwards in the Q&A with the speaker, and he said, well, actually it was young people that created the civil rights movement, because right, it was like their parents were like, don't go out there, don't do that, we're painting a big target on ourselves. It was young people who had the courage to, and who literally led the civil rights movement. And then I started thinking, well, that's actually true for probably most movements, right? Like most times in history, like during the post-Vietnam War, I think there's a lot of young people who spoke out, right? And so I think that's true just in general when you look at even movements around the world that were significant historical moments. It is young people that actually changed it and got people to listen and pay attention, right? Because there's always this tension between older and younger generations. And so we only have to point to history to remind them that it does matter, right? But I think on a local level, how do you make young people believe that they matter? Well, I think that is a matter of like getting them engaged first in the philanthropy and the service, and then also explaining just the gravity of the situation on a local level, right? Like, yes, you can believe that like kids are experiencing food insecurity and hunger, but what does that mean on a local level? It means like 1 in X kids are feeling hungry at different parts of the day, right? And then how do young people sort of really synthesize that information, that the social issue, that number, that data, and really understand how they can do something to make a difference, right? And nothing happens like, sure, one person volunteering for 2 hours doesn't matter. However, 2,000 or 200 or 20 young people volunteering for 2 hours on a social cause does matter, right? So like, listen, if I only lose 2 pounds, it doesn't matter. It's about like it's like 2 pounds, a month, like for a year plus is what really creates the impact that you want, right? But each of those 2 pounds really matters, right? So really reminding young people that of course you alone are not here meant to like solve anything, right? That's not how anything gets resolved. We're all in this together, and we all have a part to play, and we can all do something, right? We can all do something.
Yeah. And I see, I think we also need to change the way we talk about young people.
Yes.
To your point, there's always this like, I think about the workplace and, how the kids are lazy. They don't want to work. They're, but it's like underneath all of that is a revolution and a pushback around how things are done, right?
Yes.
It's not that they don't want to work. It's not that they are entitled or they're lazy.
Correct.
It's that they're not willing to work in toxic workplaces where leadership is damaging, or toxic workplaces where they're burning themselves out. So this is actually literally what my book is about that I'm writing. So awesome. I love this topic. I feel like it's a whole nother podcast, but
sure, let me know when.
Yeah, right. We'll do it. When young people, I'm putting this in quotations because, like, I think we just have this habit, this like cultural habit of like looking down on the previous generation. And it's not helpful. It's actually like not being responsive to change. And we need to crack that, I think, a little bit as to why people think the next generation needs to suffer the way the last generation did, for example. Like those are things that are really, really damaging to progress.
Well, they are. And, so timely. I was just at an event literally just last Friday, a few days ago, right? Where there was a younger panel. They were smart enough to have a young group panel to kind of talk about stuff. And two of the things that the young folks said, younger than you and me, I'm still young in many ways, but yeah. So two things that they said was exactly what you're touching upon. One was, um, just because our struggle isn't what your struggle was doesn't mean we're not struggling. Doesn't mean we have our own version of struggles, right? And then when you ignore or dismiss our struggles, you actually are not, you're hurting our ability to actually express ourselves and to talk about, you know, and also, like, we have ways to solve things that are just going to look very differently than what your solutions are, right? So it echoes exactly what you just said, which is they don't want to be dismissed for the things that they're feeling and experiencing that are difficult and challenging. um,
Mhm.
they want to be
And
they want to be heard, right?
yes, yeah.
And
And I
seen.
remember, I think we all remember being that generation in the workplace or in the system, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
a millennial, so we were talked about all the way up until I feel like just a few years ago, where finally we were raising our hands saying, we are old news. You
Yeah.
need to be focused on these next two generations that are coming. We're in our 40s almost. We have children, we have families, we are, like, we are old news. And I remember, like, people, going into organizations and people were still talking about millennials. I'm like, I don't know. We caused some sort of uproar with our generation that
Yeah.
hopefully set some good foundation for the next. Because I see Gen Z, and I just could not be prouder how they are taking what millennials did to the next level around accountability and their
Yes.
voice. Like, I feel like millennials,
Transparency. Yeah.
transparency. We were still kind of playing the game. Millennials, we were pushing for the next thing, but we were still like, all right, we need to find the good job and we need to climb the corporate ladder and we need to do all the things.
Yeah.
And now, that, I'm 38, so we're like heading into our 40s. Now we're questioning everything, and we're looking at Gen Z like the younger brother or sister, and that I think is a beautiful thing. And that's how generations should interact with each other.
Yeah.
Like, what can I give you to help you progress? And yes, you might be young, maybe you're in a different life stage, but I think
Right.
there's just wisdom that doesn't has nothing to do with age.
Yeah.
So we need
Well,
to
there is
respect.
wisdom, and honestly, there's also just we can do, like, we can start with just, hey, like, instilling a belief in them that they matter, that they're
Yes.
that they have
Yes.
impact, that they're
Hmm.
one person's actions, words, like, they do carry impact, right? I think maybe younger people believe that in the sense of like activism, but
Hmm.
they actually, I think, miss it when we're just talking about daily life, right? Like, um, small gestures, many ways of, like, just the
Hmm.
ways we carry ourselves in the world, our consumer dollar and how it matters, and how our vote really matters, and
Hmm.
how these sort of individual actions really matter. And I think so that might be a place where we all can start, is reminding them of how much they do matter, right? They just really
Hmm.
are. Their solutions, their innovative ideas are what are going to transform our worlds, right, in meaningful ways. And it's incumbent upon us to pay it forward by helping, by being that for them, right?
Yes. Well, Shafali, it is a pleasure to do that work with you. Like, I feel like you and I are kindred spirits in the sense that we are working towards this, nurturing the next generation. And I love the idea of, like, pouring into them in that way. That feels really purposeful.
Investing
So,
in them,
and
investing in them in that
yes,
way. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So if you're listening to this, and like, I was talking to my mom. I talk to her every Sunday, and we just
Oh,
chat for hours, and we just catch up. And she's older. She's in her mid 70s, and she's like, I want to find something that I can do to do something. I mean, because she's not the type of person who can volunteer for long periods of time, but I'm like, one of the things we talked about was, yeah, how do we pour into the next generation? How do you lift them up? And Tell them about these ideas of micro moments and micro activism. And it is a daily thing that you can do. So very excited to do this work for you. I'm so excited that you're going to be at the Culture Impact Lab in May in Chicago. And just thank you.
I'm excited to be there
who you
too.
are.
Can I close on a quote by Dr. King?
Please.
Which I think is very relevant in here. So he said famously, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And the quote is longer than that, but that covers it, right? Like a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. And I think we all have those basic minimal requirements. And that means, according to Dr. King, we can all be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was beautiful. And I guess one last thing before we let you go.
Yes.
Where can people find you? If they want to connect, if they want to work with you, what's the best way for people to find you?
So my company website is called abetterwe.com, like me, you, we, abetterwe.com. And the email is hello@abetterwe.com.
Thank you, Shefali. And we will see you in May.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Short months.
Woo! So excited.